Joining us now for a deeper dive into our conversation with the president is White House correspondent for The Hill, Jordan Fabian. Nice job, both of you, yesterday. I mean, you got tons of stuff everybody's going crazy with. Take us into, like, what the room was like, what his mood was like, what the setup was like. Give us a sense of that.
So the structure of the interview was strange first, right, Jordan? I mean, it's you almost never get like a half TV, half print. That's kind of the nature of what we do over here. So we had this agreed, and then, 2 minutes before, Sarah Sanders comes to us and says, we're not going to do it in the Oval. We had all of these logistics planned to go into the Oval Office. Filming in the Oval, I had the shots. We were thinking this, thinking that. She's like, no, we're going to do it outside. And
so is that her call? Is that his call?
It was the president's
It's definitely the president's call. I mean, he's very image conscious president.
Right.
So he's,
for sure.
with lights and background. And I remember one thing he told us before the interview. Right. He just points out to the Rose Garden. He goes, "Isn't the light beautiful?"
So he wanted that good lighting.
He just went, good lighting. And he knew it. So it was, the man like truly knows. He was like, which shot am I on? He knew exactly like what was going on here. And he's very cognizant of how he looks and who he's speaking to and like, and the shot, and sometimes he looks directly into the camera. It's all part of every action is concerted.
It's almost as if he had his own television show before he was president.
He knows how to work
He really
those
knows
angles.
what he's doing.
For sure.
And what about like the length of the interview? Is that something that's set in advance, or is that something that just kind of like
so they always
goes
say
as long
15
as he wants
minutes.
to?
Right. But we could tell from the beginning, at least the off-camera portion, it was sort of however long we could stay in there and keep him engaged. So I would say the off-camera portion lasted about 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. He went off the record at some points, but we really got him talking, and that's really the key, is just to keep him talking, because if he starts shutting down and saying, yes, no, I don't care.
If he loses interest,
totally.
You're done.
Yeah, and Sarah Sanders is sitting right to our side, and at a certain point she's saying, all right, guys, time to wrap it up. And I remember she tried to get the receptionist to bail her out. She's like, what's the president got on his schedule? And she says, oh, he's got some kind of signing or something. And Trump just goes,
Because it's like not helpful.
Exactly.
But I mean, let's get into some of the news. So for the on-camera portion, we did ask the president about Joe Biden and the debates that are coming up. Let's take a listen to what he said.
And how he doesn't get President Obama to endorse him, there has to be some reason why he's not endorsing him. He was a vice president. They seem to have gotten along. And how President Obama is not endorsing him is rather a big secret. If you want to know, if you know the answer, please let me know, because I think it's very important. And then he goes and lies and said, I asked the president not to endorse me. Give me a break.
And he went on to talk about how, what did he say, there's something off about, I think he's off, he's different. We've all known him for a long time. I've seen him for a long time. Frankly, he looks different, he sounds different, and he thinks different. Other than that, I hope he does very well. I mean, it gives me, Jordan, flashbacks to 2016 and all the, like, there's something going on there with Hillary Clinton and her health. Like, clearly they're teeing up a very similar playbook against Biden.
Absolutely. And we've heard him say before, sort of make these allusions to his age.
His step.
Yeah, he's not the same guy. You know?
Right.
And the funny thing is, I mean, Joe Biden's only 3 years older than President Trump. So, I mean, they're really of the same generation. But, the president likes to present Biden as someone who's in failing health and someone who's, mentally declining, even though there's really no evidence to back that up. I mean, the same allegations, in fact, have been leveled against the president by his critics. So, look, I think he recognizes Biden as the front runner, and he's looking for any kind of attack that will stick against him and try to knock him down a peg.
I mean, do you think do you think he sees Biden as a real threat?
I'm not sure if he views him as a real threat. I think he really wants to face him in the election. I think him in his campaign, at the beginning, they were like, please don't elevate him, please don't elevate him. Some of the people I've talked to, they still wouldn't wish that he would blatantly attack him because they think it rises him in the polls. But I think Trump genuinely believes it would be a 2016 redux. I mean, that's something we've talked about a lot. And he thinks, I ran against the establishment already. I think I could probably beat Joe Biden.
He knows the playbook.
The conventional wisdom right now in D.C. is that, Joe Biden would be able to win the white working class vote and all that. But I don't think Trump thinks that's so sure.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Interesting. So you also got into Iran, and you asked whether he believed he had the authority, had the power to unilaterally strike Iran without congressional approval. Let's take a listen to that.
I do like keeping them. They have ideas, that intelligent people. They'll come up with some thoughts. I actually learned a couple of things the other day when we had our meeting with Congress, which were, I think, helpful to me. But I do like keeping them abreast, but I don't have to do it legally.
Yeah, that was a big news out of the president. That's a direct contradiction to Nancy Pelosi. I asked him directly. Nancy Pelosi says that you need congressional approval. He said, no, I don't. That's already getting a lot of buzz on Congress. Congress was not happy to hear that, but that's
the Senate Democrats are talking now about potentially filibustering a major defense budget to try to get an amendment on the AUMF so that he explicitly does not have that power. He also, Jordan, though, went into, this whole question of the timeline of when he got information about how many casualties would result from a military strike. I mean, his story was, again, like a little bit different than it's been. Well, we had many options. Well, we didn't know until the last minute. It still doesn't make any sense.
No, and Saagar pressed him on it as well. And he was still vague about when exactly that information was offered. He said essentially it was offered at the last minute, but we know from senior military people, former military people, that's not usual. That's not how it usually goes. A casualty estimate is usually one of the first things you would get before even considering a strike. And so I followed up and asked him, if there were any casualty considerations at all, and you think that's disproportionate, then why were you even considering a military strike in response to this incident? And he said, well, it's, he kind of just tried to deflect the question. But, again, timeline still, I think we got a little more out of him, Saagar, but still some unanswered questions there about
lots of
how this whole thing came to be.
Right, and especially given the reporting that the planes were actually in the air. Like he had said go. And we had a guest on yesterday who said that, he had information from the Pentagon
Trump
that this
says
was happening.
there were no planes in the air. He's always pushed back against that. We also talked about the new rape accusation against the president by E. Jean Carroll, who's I think she's a columnist. The president hit back at her. He said, "I'll say it with great respect. Number one, she's not my type. Number two, it never happened. It never happened, okay?" We asked him, I think, Jordan, you asked him, is she lying? He said, totally lying. I don't know anything about her. I know nothing about this woman. I know nothing about her. She's a terrible thing that people can make statements like that. He talked about a photo which showed the two of them together saying, "It was standing with my coat on in a line, give me a break, with my back to the camera. I have no idea who she is." She actually responded to the president live last night on CNN. Let's take a listen.
I love that. I am so glad I am not his type. I am so glad. This was 20 years ago. And I probably was, at that moment, in that 5 minutes, the most attractive woman in Bergdorf's in that one bit of time.
I mean, Saagar, you guys are reporters, so you can't really say this, but it is abhorrent that the president would say this. And I mean, it implies basically if she was his type, then he would rape her. I mean, it's awful that he phrases it this way. But Jordan, I love her response, basically like, yeah, whatever, I'm glad I'm not his type.
Yeah, and really, he's used this sort of line against other of his accusers. There was one woman in 2016, and he gave a similar response. And I don't know if she ever responded. So this is kind of the first time that he's leveled this, vehement of an accusation or use this kind of rhetoric, and we've heard someone respond in real time. And what it served to do is this is a story that on Friday I don't think was getting that top level headline play.
Right.
And by saying that sort of thing, it really elevated it in the headlines and really blew it into the public view.
That's actually a great point, Saagar, because a lot of New York Times sort of barely covered it. Like, frankly, so many women have accused this president of horrible behavior up to and including sexual assault that and it doesn't seem to change public opinion that a lot of mainstream media is basically like, well, here's another one. But with this response, he has made this a bigger story for himself.
Yeah, I mean, a New York Times editor actually came out and said that we approached the Jean Carroll accusations with great caution, but they did cover the response. But yeah, I mean, he feels like she's lying, and this is how he hits back against these things. I'm not going to pass moral judgment on him. I am glad that we could get the response.
Yeah, but it is. That's actually a great point, Jordan. Though that this story probably would have just died down, and now he's given it life that it didn't have before.
If somebody's hitting at him, he has to hit.
Yeah, but he doesn't have to say she's not my type.
Oh, you're right.
I mean, he can just say it's not true.
He can't just sit there. Like it's not in his constitution.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
You guys covered so much ground. You got him to weigh in on reparations.
Yep.
Saagar, you guys both got him to weigh in on women's soccer.
We did, yeah.
What do you have to say about that?
The Women's World Cup is going on right now, so we asked him about Megan Rapinoe and her and kneeling during the national anthem in the past, how she refuses to cover over her hand over her heart during the national anthem. He said it's not appropriate. I asked him, do you think that's an appropriate thing for her to do? I was expecting more of an animated response. He said, no, that's not appropriate. You could tell he was annoyed by that. But what was also interesting is we asked him about equal pay, and he had kind of nuanced answer.
Yeah, he said, well, I really got to study that because in sports a lot of times there's revenue flows, and it's not really just a question of equal pay. It's like how much money you're generating.
Right.
But we know from a Wall Street Journal report last week that the women's team is out earning the men's team as far as bringing in ratings and revenue. So that's that. And Saagar prefaced his question with that, and the president. I mean, I guess he didn't get that far in the Wall Street Journal that day, but exactly. But so maybe if he reads that article, he'll have a better answer.
I mean, another one, Jordan, that I thought he would have had a more aggressive response on, frankly, was reparations. He said, you guys asked him whether the government should pursue reparations. And he said, I think it's a very unusual thing. It's been a very interesting debate, but I don't see it happening, no. But he didn't really, I thought for sure he would take a position. He didn't really take a position. It's just I don't see it happening.
I think he didn't want to take a position. He was just like, no, I don't see it happening. I think it was more of a practical thing. He's like, I don't see it happening. But he didn't want to, skew people one way or the other.
It's funny, though, because this is one of those times, and he does this, where he is acting as a pundit on his own government. Where he has a role.
Like, you're the president. If you wanted to make reparations happen, then that would carry some weight.
His favorite thing is to just be an observer and a pundit and be like, I don't think it's going to happen.
And I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure some people would agree with him, but again, he has his hands on the levers of power, and look, if they create some kind of commission, he could probably create a presidential commission if he wanted to study reparations. He probably wouldn't even need Congress to do that.
The final thing I want to get into was one of the last questions I asked him was whether he should be on Mount Rushmore, because there's some previous reporting.
I love that you all asked him.
Well,
that,
there's some previous reporting that he very seriously told the current governor of South Carolina that he should be on Mount Rushmore. She was like, I thought he was joking, he was dead serious. And I was like, oh, maybe we can get him to say it publicly here for the first time. And the president just came out, he's like, if I answer yes to that question, he's like, they'll kill me.
I know, that's why we asked.
It's like, that's what I want to know.
So, I mean, the other interesting thing just on the atmospherics before we let Jordan get back to work, because I know you guys still have transcript to put out of this. There's more stuff that people are going to learn about today in a very newsy interview. But his style, goes on the record, off. Part of why it's so much work when you talk to him is because you've got to pull out the parts where he's off the record. He's constantly going back and forth. I mean, how does that, what does that do in terms of the conversation? Like, how does that change the flow?
Well, his attention can flow from one thing to the next. So I think as an interviewer, you want to try to just keep him as focused as possible on the question at hand. And it's not an easy thing to do because he's sort of a buzzsaw, and he can just, once he gets on a train of thought, he keeps rolling.
Just keep going.
So at certain points, I thought maybe this might be getting away from us, but I think we were able to sort of rein it in a little bit and get him to answer the question.
You just got to interject on you. I mean, it's a hard thing to cut the president off and just be like, sir, it's like very it's a concerted game to be like, well, let's get. What about this? And then you'll be like, okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Right.
So eventually
he'll just go on and on and different 500 different directions.
There are parts where you have to engage. There are parts where you have to cut it off and try and move the conversation.
Right. And parts where you have to know to let him go because he's going in an interesting direction. That's going to be newsworthy.
Right. And you're like, that's interesting. Let him keep talking on this.
Well, you guys did a great job. You got a lot of interesting stuff out of him. Jordan, thanks for stopping by and giving us insights this morning. Yeah, great work. And get that transcript down and then get some rest.
That's right. Next on Rising, some of the medical research on marijuana's positive effects needs a second look. That's according to Dr. Mary Jane Creek. She tells us why.
And yesterday, the president signed an executive order to increase drug pricing transparency. Two healthcare experts are going to weigh in on the importance of fair drug pricing and value-based care. All that when Rising continues.